Welcome to the Cody Felger Podcast, a podcast dedicated to talking Colts football. Here is your host, Cody Felger.
On with you now, Andrew Thomison of sportskita.com. Andrew, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. How are you, Cody?
I'm doing good, man. It's definitely been a wild couple weeks in the NFL, and so I know it's been wild in my life, and I'm sure it's been pretty busy. You staying busy as well in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, Sportskita, and just now starting there, and I'm excited to see where that goes. And I just wrapped up my sophomore year in college, so
that's exciting.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so finals go well and all that?
Yeah, they went well for the most part. So I'm just excited to see where this new opportunity takes me at Sportskita and to get the summer going.
Definitely. And Andrew, I know it's been a couple weeks since the draft. I guess it's been a little over a week now. But the Colts, they brought in a pretty good haul. They traded out of the first round Thursday night to acquire a second-round pick for next year's draft, including the second-round pick this year. And from their second-round pick, we'll start with their first second-round pick, number 34 overall. That was the pick that was acquired last year in the Quentin Nelson, Sam Darnold trade. And the Colts selected cornerback from Temple, Rock Ya-Sin. Andrew, what do you make of this pick?
I love the pick. I know when we spoke in our last podcast, that was one of the positions that I said to look out for in terms of potentially being drafted. With Rock Ya-Sin, he's a very physical man-to-man corner that is not afraid to get up close and personal with opposing receivers, quite literally. And he is going to bring great depth and physicality to a Colts cornerback room, cornerback unit that I guess some would say could use that kind of physicality.
Yeah, definitely. I know that last year, obviously, the Colts used a lot of zone coverage, and it kind of bit them in the butt, kind of came back to haunt them in that Kansas City game. And so what can the Colts do now with Ya-Sin, since you said he's such a good man-to-man guy? What can that do for Eberflus and this defense going forward?
That's a good question. I think we'll see a lot of man-to-man schemes being placed in. I think there's plenty of zone that we'll see throughout this upcoming season. I'm sure, as that was, as you mentioned, that was sort of what we primarily used last season. But like I was saying, with man-to-man, I think we'll see that implemented a lot more with Ya-Sin and Pierre Desir too. He's more of a physical corner, 6'2". I would not be surprised in the least bit to see him being implemented in a man-to-man scheme along with Ya-Sin.
Yeah, definitely. And, just thinking of that corner group, and we'll get into another player the Colts drafted who will play corner as well. But, man, that corner group, I'm kind of obsessed with that group in particular because it's like, realistically, the Colts have, 8 players who I think are good players, 7 or 8 players who I think are good players, and I don't want to cut any of them. And so it's going to be very, very hard, which is a good problem to have, I guess. But, it's a little hard to cut ties with some of those guys who you think have a lot of potential.
Yeah, it's certainly not a bad problem to have. I think that was one of the things that sort of bit us in the butt last season was lack of depth, and I think that's one thing that Chris Ballard really centered his focus on was depth. And so with the drafting of Rock Ya-Sin, I think that just adds to a cornerback room, with Kenny Moore, with Pierre Desir, with, you said Marvin Tell, who I think is real versatile and can play both safety and corner. It's a great selection with Marvin Tell, and I think he's going to, much similar to Rock Ya-Sin, bring great depth and physicality to an already stacked cornerback room.
Yeah, definitely. What do you make of Tell? I mean, I don't know a whole lot about this guy. I know, obviously, he went to USC. He's very versatile. He played safety, and I think from what I've heard, he didn't have a great senior season, which could be a big reason why he fell to the 5th round. But he had a pretty good junior season. So do you think this pick is more so on maybe his performance his junior year or overall just potential as a player going forward?
I think it has to do with more so his performance during his junior year. Mm-hmm. I know Chris Ballard is a big believer in I guess you could call it second chances. I suppose that doesn't really maybe fit this particular point, but with Marvin Tell, as you mentioned, he's very versatile, and like I said earlier, with depth I think that was another big reason for taking Tell, is just because, like I said earlier last season, that came back to haunt us. So, but another player I really look at too is Khari Willis.
Yeah.
We took him in the 4th round. Yeah, we traded up 20 spots to get him, and that really intrigued me because Chris Ballard, he likes them picks. So seeing him trade 20 spots up was kind of shocking. So it makes me wonder if he saw something in Khari Willis that maybe other GMs around the league and other personnel did not see.
Yeah, definitely. I know that Willis he was a captain at Michigan State. He's a solid player overall. I think he doesn't have a whole lot of glaring weaknesses, but more so I think this was about first off character, which is something that Ballard places such a high value on, even though he takes risks on some guys. But I think this draft in particular, we'll just talk about Khari Willis for a little bit. Like, this guy he's a good dude. He really is. He's a good football player, but he's a good guy in general overall. It definitely appears that way, and so. Yeah, he definitely, I think, at least from what I've seen and what I've heard of him, he'll definitely be that box-type safety guy, similar to Clayton Geathers, maybe Clayton Geathers' insurance a little bit. But then you look at that safety room, man. Like, that safety room now, you think you got Malik Hooker, you got Clayton Geathers, who you just re-signed. You got George Odom, who I think played really, really well last year. I mean, all things considered, as a rookie kind of jumping in there. I thought he had his moments, and I know the Colts are pretty high on him. And then you got a guy like Matthias Farley, and then they signed Derek Kendrick from the Browns, who is a solid player, and I think he's young and can still develop into a better player. And then you add Khari Willis into the scheme, and even Marvell Tell, who knows, he could play some safety as well. So really, I think. What are your impressions, Andrew, I guess, of this defensive back group in general? We'll look at the safeties because we already talked about the corners a little bit. What's your overall impression of how Ballard really helped improve this depth in the safety position?
Yeah, I mean, I just look at last year when Matthias Farley and Clayton Geathers missed a significant amount of time due to injury. And I guess I'll go back to what I said earlier with the not having enough depth, and it came back to bite us in the butt. In a lot of different instances, and I think that was one of the primary reasons for the slow start, the 1-5 start. There were other reasons, of course, but I think lack of depth was a huge influence on that portion of our season. But I mean, I agree with you, Cody. This safety room is something special, and it's something unique. And I'm going to go back to a point that you had mentioned earlier with when it comes to cutting our roster down to only 53 players. It's going to be difficult. I mean, because all of those players are phenomenal players. Kindred, as you said, who we picked up from the Browns off of waivers, he's a very young and upcoming safety. And I'm sure, there was a reason that Chris Ballard went after him. And then, like we said, Marvell Tell and Khari Willis, they're both, they both have unique skill sets to them. And it's going to be very, very interesting come training camp. And when roster cuts come around to see who exactly stays and who doesn't.
Right, and I thought it was interesting. The Colts told Mike Mitchell, who they signed last year, who was kind of a revelation coming in at that strong safety position, but they didn't bring him back. So you think Khari Willis will kind of slide into that role a little bit, Mike Mitchell type role, if he doesn't somehow take that position from Geathers, which you never know. You never really know, but. Like you're saying, at the end of the day, it came back to bite them in the butt with the lack of depth that they had. I mean, with Malik Hooker injured during that Kansas City game and starting J.J. Wilcox. I mean, in reality, you don't want to start a guy like J.J. Wilcox in a divisional game. And so I think this was definitely a good pick by Ballard. I mean, these couple picks here, I mean, I think they're good for depth purposes and, signing Kindred, getting Matthias Farley back, who the Colts didn't have for the majority of the year, but I think had a nice 2017 campaign. I think the Colts, man, they got a lot of depth first and foremost, and they got a lot of talent in that secondary. And so it'll be interesting to see, like you said, when that 53-man roster has to come together, who's staying and who's going. Because I always go back to what Ballard said when he was talking about, that you have good depth and that your team is in a good place when you're cutting players that are good players and they're being instantly signed by other teams. And I think this is the first year maybe that we'll see that from the Colts, where they have to cut ties with some players. Unfortunately, it's kind of the name of the business, the name of the game here. But you'll see them sign with other players or other teams, I should say, and do good. And I think that's a sign, truly, that the Colts have a very well-rounded roster overall.
Yeah, and it says, it also shows that we're trending in the right direction.
Right.
As Ballard said, and he's, people, other GMs, other professionals, other personnel staff on different teams and different organizations may follow suit.